This is Keys to the Shop, episode 94, How to Map It Forward with Lee Safar. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you the insights, inspiration, and tools you're going to need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFiorio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm really excited to have you along today because it is a very, very good episode today. We are talking with Lee Safar all about mapping out your career, all about becoming professional as a barista, all about making successful businesses out of cafes. There is a lot of things that are unpacked in this conversation, and Lee does it masterfully. And so this is a great conversation I had with her. I'm really excited to share it with you. Now, before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors here at Keys to the Shop, starting with Prima Coffee. So Prima Coffee is a specialty coffee equipment supplier, and they're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And from the beginning of their company, they've set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public and professionals alike. Their focus in this is on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines to under-counter refrigeration, pretty much anything you can think of, not only for home use, but to supply you and your business. They put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. So if you are going to be starting a coffee bar and you need an espresso machine, grinders, equipment, and wondering which ones should I get, what are perfect for me, these are the guys to talk to. Same thing if you're looking to upgrade or replace equipment that you have in your current cafe. Go to prima-coffee.com and see what they have to offer. Reach out to them. Tell them Keys to the Shop sent you. I've always had a great experience working with Prima Coffee, and I know you will too. So again, visit prima-coffee.com, and my thanks to Prima Coffee for their support of Keys to the Shop. Now, I also want to thank our sponsor, Pacific Foods. They are the ones behind the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages. They're designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards of excellence that they demand. Now, that goes for almond milk, soy, coconut, rice, and their new addition, oat milk, which I've just had the pleasure of using over the weekend in Coffee Fest, and it was fantastic. Its ability to take the heat from steaming and produce an unmatched silky texture and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee also makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific also, you should know, is a huge supporter and has been for a long time of specialty coffee, and have demonstrated their passion for the community by listening to and serving the needs of real specialty coffee professionals. So go to pacificfoods.com and learn more about the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages and see how their addition to your cafe can help elevate the non-dairy options that your customers enjoy. So thank you again to Pacific for their support of Keys to the Shop. Okay, so today we are talking about mapping it forward, about your career in the coffee bar, in the cafe. This is something that we all kind of dream about, having a sustainable career as a barista, as maybe a cafe manager, where we have a living wage, where we feel accomplished. It really is something that seems kind of like a unicorn. Not many people get it, and that is something that Lee is out to change. She is out to do no less than change the way that we do business in coffee retail and coffee at large. I think she's going for world domination here, at least going to change the world for the better. I think you'll get the drift after our conversation, the kind of passion that is behind this project called Map It Forward. So first, a little bit about Lee. She worked in the corporate world for about 8 years as a senior business analyst and project manager at IBM. And she entered the specialty coffee world with the hope of building a career in the coffee industry while launching her music career and record label. So 15 years later, having worked as a longtime barista with some of the busiest shops in Sydney, Australia, as well as a number of shops overseas in America and the UK, Lee is now the owner of Map It Forward, Elixir Specialty Coffee, and the host of the Map It Forward podcast. So the goal of Map It Forward is to provide top quality, affordable career mentoring and coaching from people in the coffee industry that basically have demonstrated and built their careers from the ground up by, learning to navigate their path with integrity, craft, mastery, and professionalism. So these are the types of people that Lee brings in for you to learn from. She has a bunch of great podcasts, live podcasts, where she has great conversations with people who you definitely could learn a thing or two from, and Lee included, Lee herself. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this conversation. We're going to be talking with Lee all about her advice for future owners, for current owners, fundamental aspects of what a barista should be focusing on in their early careers. We talk about tipping, having goals, the importance of playing the long game, just a bunch of stuff that, I think as I look back at this conversation, it really impresses me how valuable the content of this conversation is, and how, if applied as a barista, it could change where you are in your career years from now, and you wouldn't be spinning your wheels in the wrong fit of a career or job. If you just take some wisdom from Lee in this conversation, I think you're going to be better for it. So now that I've built you up for this, let's get right to the content and take you to my conversation with the owner of Map It Forward and the Map It Forward podcast, Lee Safar. Well, hello, Lee, and welcome to Keys to the Shop. So glad to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was made aware of your work, of course, I think first through Elixir Specialty Coffee, your company, and also then this Map It Forward, this consulting, this teaching, and now a podcast. It's just, I think, really fantastic what you're doing for people's careers, and it really got me excited to talk to you, and I'm just so pleased to have you on the show. I just really resonate with where you're going with your project. So really congratulations on all the success you've had in that.
Thanks so much. I'm busy, to say the least.
No doubt. You wasn't it just recently, in the last few months, that you launched your podcast? Yes,
we're less than 2 months old.
Wow. And it seems to have been just growing. You're very prolific in that. So great content. And your whole focus is on helping people to, like your company says, to map it forward, to kind of curate their careers and happen to their careers. As a friend of mine, Scott Barlow, likes to say, you weren't always in coffee, though. You had a career before coffee. And you found yourself all these years forward in coffee. Like, you left a corporate job of 8 years. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about how you found yourself in coffee. What did that road look like for you?
I had gone to school to study genetics, and I finished my genetics degree with the hope of becoming a genetic counselor. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, a genetic counselor is somebody who is pretty much the interpreter between the scientists and the doctors and the patients. And they interpret all the genetic information that they need to know during either their pregnancies or during any kinds of major surgeries. And that was really appealing to me. So after my genetics degree and an associate diploma in counseling, it was a very young profession in Australia. And my professors had said to me, go and do anything for 10 years just to get some life experience and then come back and become a genetic counselor, because we can't have a 20-year-old telling a woman whose baby has hydrocephalus that they need to terminate the pregnancy. And I figured they had a point. So I started, and I knew at that point that I didn't want to work in a lab. I had been working in a lab and it was boring. So I ventured into the corporate world and hated it. Really tried to fit in and realized that the corporate world is not for me, and found myself saying that if I was going to hate my life one more time, and I heard myself say one more time, I want to quit this and just work in a cafe and explore what it feels like to do that, then I was going to have to do it. And I did. I heard myself say that. And I was looking to fill my life with what my passions were, and that was music and coffee. And so I left the corporate world, and really at the time, the specialty coffee industry was really starting to be birthed in Australia. And I was fortunate enough, even though I didn't know that it was called the specialty coffee world, we weren't really using that word there at that point. It was just the coffee industry.
This was about 15 years ago.
Yeah. And at that point, I was really nervous. I was married and had mortgages and, had become accustomed to a certain lifestyle based on the wages that myself and my husband at the time were earning, and was really nervous about what baristas get paid. I'd never worked in the hospitality industry at all, ever, and really didn't know what to expect. At the time, given that the industry was really starting to transition from what we now call the second wave, I found myself not earning as much, certainly not what we're earning today in Australia as specialty coffee baristas, but not earning as bad a pay rate as I thought I would be. It was still entry level, and I had a very supportive husband, and he was very excited for me to finally be doing something that I was excited about. And it was the best thing I ever did for myself.
So going into it, it must have been a bit of an adjustment period, both a relief and kind of some shock. What were some of the things that you experienced going into coffee that really took some getting used to?
I was terrified, honestly. It felt like being the first day, or it felt like being the new kid at a new school on the first day. Because I had no experience in coffee and I'd never worked in hospitality, I didn't know what to expect. The big joke was with the first coworker I had. His name was Marco. He used to joke and tell everyone, this corporate education that Lee's got has taught her that if something says caution hot surface, you should touch it. And and he was pretty right, because I kept doing things that were completely out of character for what I didn't have. The industry smarts or the common sense. I still had my corporate brain on, and I still expected that people would just do things for you the same way that they did in the corporate world. And I learned pretty quickly that I needed to get my feet grounded, and I needed to get in there and hustle and keep up and learn how to play better as a team member. I had to humble myself and learn that I'm starting at the bottom. Even though I'd lived this really nice career in the corporate world, I was the bottom of the barrel when it came to my new profession, and that was terrifying. And I had no idea how I was going to learn what I needed to learn. I was very fortunate to have landed at the cafe that I did land at, where they sent me to Toby's estate.
The most from their people. And it kind of is where your organization, Map It Forward, is seeking to make some change. Was it kind of from this place in your career where you started to realize that you had something to offer as you observed the specialty coffee world and the people around you? Just how did it, eventually turn into, I want to not only just help myself do well in this job, but help other people also?
Yeah, well, if I'm honest, I've spent the last 15 years really confused by some of the behaviors that I would witness in the coffee industries. And that confusion comes from me not knowing why people didn't understand some of the just fundamental things of professionalism, and me wondering, is it something that I'm doing that's causing people to respond this way in the workplaces that I'm at? Because every single place I worked, I was experiencing the same thing. And it absolutely was not from everybody in the workplace, but there was always that one or two people in the workplace that would do things like just show up an hour late to work.
Wow.
At different places that I was at via text message, or just never showing up to work on time again. People thought it was okay to not show their employer respect or not be grateful for the job that they had. They were not thinking long term. And where their profession could take them. There was this ego that I saw kept creeping in any team dynamics. Mm-hmm. And it was all of that together with a whole bunch of other stuff, people not knowing how to ask for pay rises, people not knowing how to communicate and have conversations with the coworkers and their bosses, people thinking that they didn't have to have customer service skills because, their coffee is so great that it doesn't matter if they don't know how to talk to customers. Their coffee is everything. And I just thought, why am I so confused here? Why don't we as an industry try and tackle these issues, particularly now that I'm living in America and seeing that there's this real kind of chicken and egg situation happening. And I'm writing an article about this at the moment. There's a chicken and an egg situation happening whereby employees are saying, well, I make minimum wage or close to minimum wage, and so I shouldn't have to do any more than the base minimum of what my job is. And employers are saying, well, even if I wanted to pay my employees more, I can't afford to because they're not making me enough money. So we can live in this perpetual cycle for a long time and nothing will change. But we're presented with this amazingly unique moment in the history of our industry whereby Uber has shown up and Lyft have shown up and given people who don't want to be in the coffee industry an out. And it's a lot easier to go and work for Uber and Lyft than it is to stand on your feet all day and have to be nice to customers for tips just so that you can get some sort of a barely livable wage. So what has happened there is the mass exodus from our industry has left us with passionate people who really want to be coffee professionals, but they're earning a pay rate that in 5 years from now won't get them any better off than they are today. And we need to change that. And that's where Map It Forward came in. It was this idea that, well, we're not going to get this moment in our history again, and I want to see how I can contribute to breaking this cycle. And perhaps it might help me resolve a lot of the confusion that I've been experiencing across the last 15 years of my career. And I can use that experience to help people navigate a lot quicker through the difficulty and the discomfort of the earlier years of their career so that they can build a really well-established foundation to a career that not only helps them, but empowers their employer to have a really successful business.
Mm. So both parties are winning in this case, and it is a blame game in some ways. Like you're saying, that chicken and egg concept, which is fascinating because it makes me ask a question in my mind, which is, well, who's to blame really? Is it the structure of the way we have shops running now? Is it just something that needs to change with the way that specialty shops are run or started, or is it, how much of this is us taking charge ourselves and being the captains of our fate, so to speak, and how much of it is clamoring for the change at the organizational level?
Well, that's a really great question. And it's exactly what this article is about. It's mapping out the plan for how we're going to change the direction of the way this conversation is going right now. We've got one of two options. We can continue perpetuating the cycle where everyone's blaming the other party and nothing changes, or we can draw a line in the sand and we can say, I want to be proactive in creating my own success. I'm going to learn what I need to learn to become a true coffee professional, not just be another coffee people. And I'm going to basically professionalize myself. And in doing so, What's involved in that is generating more revenue for my employer so that they can afford to give me and want to give me the pay rise that I'm asking for because I have funded my own pay rise.
And not everyone's going to be receptive, of course, but maybe another company will be.
You know, I've never met a business owner that when you made more money for them, they wanted to fire you.
Yes.
Have you?
No. That's a great point.
And so what we're doing is we're saying, look, let's break this cycle. Let's stop trying to assign blame. And let's create a solution here that's win-win for everybody. You're going to go to your employer. You're going to say to them, after you've spent the time learning how to be professional, and that doesn't just mean I can make great coffee. In fact, it means everything else other than coffee. It means you're saying, my coffee's okay, but tomorrow will be better. It means learning how to get the communication skills required to be more present at work. It means learning how to say to your boss, how can I do better? How can I be more present for this business? It's doing all those things and then going and saying to your boss, hey, listen, how have I been doing over the last 12 months? Have you noticed a change in sales when I'm on shift? Because in 3 months from now, I'd love to come and ask you for a pay rise. And I'd love to know what I need to do to guarantee that I'm going to get that pay rise.
There's not a lot of people that do that. Not a lot of baristas would, go into the boss's office and say those things. Why do you think that is? Why are we afraid to sort of call it like that? Well, it's like you said, we don't have the professionalism that would give us the confidence. Is that it?
Exactly.
Like we kind of subconsciously know, like, I don't want to go in there because I've been cutting corners.
Well, who's taught anybody this before this?
Right.
I was fortunate enough to have one of the greatest leaders I've ever been exposed to was a boss of mine in IBM. That was the corporate company that I worked for. And he happened to be previously the commander of a naval ship in Australia. And after 20 years of service, he decided to retire from that and come into the corporate world. And I learnt so much of my leadership skills from him. And the main thing that he taught me was never stop learning how to communicate. Never stop listening to people. Never stop finding out what it is that you can do better wherever you are, in whatever you do. I was fortunate enough to be in the corporate world where this kind of behavior was expected, which is why I was so frustrated coming into the coffee industry, because we spend so much time focusing on our coffee skills. We spend very little time teaching the people that work for us how to show up for themselves and how to show up for their careers, not just for my business, but for their whole career. And because nobody's doing that, I figured, well, I will.
That's great. And it really does speak to a big gap where, on this show, for instance, we have people who author books on leadership that don't work in the coffee industry because, and people like have been guests on your show, like Jared Truby, is big into continued education and leadership development through outside sources like Disney, especially for him, and others that when you're a barista, you might be getting the job right out of college or high school or whatever. It's a younger workforce, and there isn't a lot of exposure to these corporate books that are just commonplace, like you said. And so more power to you. It's just an amazing thing that it's not been addressed as much as it hasn't been. I want to ask, what is it that we are actively doing to sabotage our ability as baristas now? I want to talk about like managers and owners and their role to play in all of this because they have a lot of power. But when we're talking about sort of taking charge of your career and mapping it forward, what is it that we're doing that's sabotaging our careers that we don't even know, in spite of our best intentions?
From the perspective of the owners and managers?
from the perspective of the barista?
I think that the core of where we get in our own way as baristas is that we tend to think that we know so much, and we tend to think that the only thing that we're here for is making coffee and serving customers. What we do forget is that we're actually here to do this other big part of our job, which is selling. And we don't want to accept that. We don't want to recognize that as a part of our job, because it's as though it's this dirty little part of what we do. And it's really not. We need to step into understanding exactly what it is our profession requires from us. So we in Map It Forward, we say that there are 4 main parts of a barista's job: cleaning, sales, beverage preparation, and customer service. And the first 2 years of your 10-year map, we call the puppy years. And those puppy years are focused on becoming an expert at the fundamentals, which are those 4 things. You need to become an expert, an absolute expert at learning how to sell, learning how to clean, learning how to make beverages, learning how to serve customers and hospitality. And if you're not doing that, if you're just focusing on one element of the 4 aspects of your job, you are getting in your own way. And you should be looking to other sources outside of our industry, particularly at the moment, because I don't know that we have a well-rounded scope or wealth of resources that are going to teach you how to sell in the coffee industry.
Right.
And I think doing things like going out and spending time in places where sales is a well-crafted element of people's jobs, like go to a Macy's counter, a Macy's perfume counter, and just watch how the people sell. They know that if they don't sell, they don't make their commissions. Go observe car salespeople. Watch how they are with making people feel comfortable, making people feel welcome. Like, you're not required to take things as far as those people take them, but I would encourage people to start looking at what are the different behavioral traits that those people bring to their job that empower them to create more business for the place that they've chosen to work at.
Mm-hmm. Now, they're motivated, especially because of that commission. So really great examples. We, on the other hand, can't or often don't connect the motivation to sales. We just see sales as some number that is on a spreadsheet in the manager or owner's office, and we have nothing to do with it. There's this disconnect. I mean, how do we get motivated when it's oftentimes shrouded in mystery?
Right. That's a really great question, because, and something that particularly confuses me is how people haven't figured out that the way that they're getting paid is a base salary plus incentives, because they are. The tipping system here in America is exactly like the sales structure of a car salesman. They get a base salary and they get commissions. Our commissions as baristas are our tips.
Mm-hmm.
I want that to change, and I've put a plan together to change that. By the end of 2022, I'm hoping that baristas are making $20 an hour with no tips.
Interesting.
And I would, and look, I guess coming from a culture where tipping is not done, I see tipping as quite a demeaning practice for everybody involved. It's uncomfortable for customers, it's demeaning for baristas, and it's uncomfortable for employers. What I would like to see is employers making enough money that they can deliver on a number of things. We don't want to be charging customers any more than they're currently paying, right? We want baristas to have a livable wage that they can depend on. And we want owners to be earning enough money where they can deliver on that, and they are the people that are responsible for providing the wage for their employees. I don't want to see customers subsidizing our employees' wages.
Right.
That's not a practice that encourages loyalty. It's not a practice that encourages stability. It's not a practice that encourages trust between our baristas and our customers, because customers are going to think, is this person going to be nicer to me just because I'm tipping them? I want to remove that barrier.
That's admirable. I can't wait to see that plan.
Yeah, it's, step one is breaking the chicken and the egg cycle. So the idea is that what we need to do is professionalize baristas. We need to get them acting like professionals and getting comfortable with the discomfort that comes with that. There's a lot of habits that have to be broken by our industry. It's about them understanding that they're playing the long game and that we do have a goal. We know what we're aiming towards, and the only people who can change it are them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The next phase is helping operators get financially healthy. So it means encouraging them to grow at a sensible rate and not open cafes prematurely. It's encouraging them to understand what a profit and loss statement is. It's about teaching them about cash flow, understanding what cost of goods are, and how they can play with those numbers so that they can reduce the cost of goods and create transparency with their employees about what the numbers really look like. Oh. And I'm bringing on board an accountant that is about to do some incredible things for the coffee industry. And he's going to come on board, and we're going to start mapping workshops for cafe owners so that they can understand those strategies. So this is not, while the baristas are going to break the chicken and the egg cycle, there is an enormous amount of work cafe owners need to do if they want to keep the baristas that have broken the cycle. So if cafe owners want to be worthy of the baristas that have taken the leap to professionalize themselves, they have to put in the work to be worthy of those employees.
And that's a lot of business work, the same way that the employee has to professionalize themselves, to come in with a learner's attitude and constantly communicate, ask for feedback, and have humility and gratefulness, and just work and not get discouraged so quickly, have a long view of their profession. The owners, it sounds like, they need to have a basic understanding or a core understanding of what makes a successful business to begin with.
Right. And I feel that so many people come into the coffee profession for a lot of the wrong reasons. They're trying to escape a corporate life. They've made some money and they think, surely running a cafe can't be that hard. Or they think, well, screw this. I've been making minimum wage as a barista. I want to make more money. I'm going to open my own cafe. I'm going to ask my parents for some money and I'm going to open a cafe, not realizing how much work actually goes into running a cafe and how difficult it is. I spend a lot of my consulting time convincing people not to open cafes.
Amen.
My advice to them is stay in your job and spend your weekends as a barista and do that for 6 to 12 months. And if you still want to open a cafe, then let's revisit this conversation. But until you've done that and until you understand exactly what it is to be a barista, you've got no business opening a cafe.
Yeah, that sounds very, very much like the situation you hear a lot of people describe, that they did just kind of, I don't want to say rash, but for lack of a better term, maybe a rash decision to open a cafe that ends up just consuming your life. Like Michael Gerber, the author of E-Myth Revisited, talks about having your business, basically you're your own boss and you're the worst boss if you're just in it for the wrong reasons. But working in the cafe, first of all, gives you that nuance of all of those little customer service interactions and the cleaning and the details, the death from 1,000 cuts sort of scenario that you might be shocked by but too late if you've opened a cafe without knowing what it would be like.
And the same thing comes when you open your second cafe. Before you've figured out all the things that you were meant to learn in your first cafe, that's as destructive as what you were suggesting. It's just not functional. It's dysfunctional behavior. And what we're trying to encourage people to do is trust the process. You go on these journeys to learn the steps that you need in order to grow. And if you skip those steps, the journey is going to force you to learn them later. And it's harder to learn them when you're trying to juggle the stresses of two businesses instead of one. A great example of this is when someone enters the coffee industry, having never been in the coffee industry before, but they make the best pour-overs at home. They know nothing about systems. They know nothing about hustling. They have never had to manage cash flow or schedules or anything like that. But over the span of 12 months, they've become a professional at everything that's required to get the permits and lay concrete and plumb a machine and all of those kinds of things in the cafe that they've opened. Then they have to open the doors. They get the doors open, and then the next challenges start to happen. The hard stuff really hits. And what people tend to do is they fall back on the laurels of what's easy for them. So now they've become a professional at what it takes to open a cafe. I don't want to do the hard stuff. I'll just get baristas and pay them minimum wage to do that, the hard stuff. I'll just go and open another cafe. But what you haven't done is focus on, well, the next challenge is, how do I actually get people through the door? How do I make this business so busy that I can afford to open another cafe with less stress? If you've opened a cafe, you shouldn't be looking at opening a second cafe for a good 3 years. And I know I sound far too logical for what most people want to hear.
Well, most people want to expand very quickly.
Right. But I promise you that by putting in the work to learn the lessons while you've got one cafe is going to help the success of your future businesses flow so much quicker. I'm constantly surprised at the number of people that are shocked with that logic.
Does it feed this chicken and egg cycle to have
Yes.
people opening cafes unprepared, and now they're held hostage by their own financial situation, which is not great? They can't really have professional baristas. Even if the baristas that they have are wanting to be professionals, they can't keep them, like you were saying, because they haven't taken the time to grow in this strategic and mindful way.
Absolutely. It's dysfunctional behavior. It is, you're providing an unsafe, and I guess when I say unsafe, a professionally unsafe environment for the people that are coming to work for you. You are a leader. You are somebody who should be a mentor to your employees. And by doing that, that means I'm creating a safe environment for you where I know I can pay you for the work that you're bringing to this job. The more confident that you are in the safety of your position here, the better you're going to perform for me. And this is where this idea that we talk a lot about in Map It Forward of life currencies comes in. If you as an employer have defined the reasons you're doing this and you understand the life currencies you're trying to get out of this, you're going to fulfill the wealth in those currencies much more strategically than you would previously by just coming from a place of ego. Because the only people who open cafes before they should are people who are following other people's leads. They are trying to keep up with the rest of the industry. Learn how to say no. Learn how to turn down the offers that seem apparently too good to be true, because that's dysfunctional behavior. Turn them down and just say, hey, listen, I'm going to take a minute, which means a couple of years, to figure out this thing that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to build some credit. I'm going to build a relationship with my employees. I'm going to put my efforts into into leading them. I'm going to bring them on this journey with me, and I'm going to be present for them as well. Now, that's an investment. That's the investment that we're asking baristas to put into by professionalizing themselves. That's the owner equivalent of that. Now, that is a very unpopular and uncomfortable thing that we are asking owners to do, because all of a sudden this becomes as much work as they were trying to escape from whatever it is that brought them into our industry in the first place.
Oops.
Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is sort of a, in the back of the mind, it's an engine or this giant machine that's going to make money. And at a certain point in all of our lives, I think we've thought about, what if I can have a business where it just kind of like makes me money and I don't do anything? I don't think a business like that exists, at least not many of them, and especially not a coffee bar where you're kind of struggling over nickels and dimes in margins, at least now. This is just really good medicine, I think, for people to hear, because obviously the churn rate of cafes is just enormous. And something like this, over the course of years, convincing people to wait, maybe not even get into the coffee industry, at least in the capacity that they were thinking, could really lower the churn rate and create a more sustainable specialty industry.
That's exactly what we're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm encouraging us to grow up as an industry and start looking at how do we create a healthy environment for the professionals that choose the specialty coffee industry.
Like the way you think.
Thank you.
So what I want to know is, those of us who are, there's two groups, people who are working in retail right now, working in coffee shops, and there are those who are leaders within coffee shops. And we just got done talking about both groups. After listening to this conversation, people are going to want to take action.
Yep.
They're going to want to take some steps within their own career, their own businesses. Let's start with baristas. Like, what can a barista do, even starting this week, to start to map it forward for their own careers, to take charge and professionalize what they do?
What a great question. Today, if you're a barista and you have decided that you want to have a long-term career in the coffee industry, I want you to sit with this question. I want you to figure out if you class yourself as coffee people or coffee professionals. If you're somebody, and let me define the difference between that. People who are coffee people come from ego. They're interested in being Insta famous. They're interested in doing the base minimum of work. They don't see that they should be super efficient at work. They're never trying to constantly improve their coffee preparation methods. They're closed-minded to new ideas. They think that customers should be privileged to receive a coffee from them. They're constantly judging the way that customers order their drinks. They're the person who would, turn their nose up at a vanilla latte or at someone who wanted to add hazelnut syrup to their latte. Those kinds of people. And we all know coffee people. A coffee professional, on the other hand, is somebody who shows up to work with enthusiasm. They're grateful to have a job because they've gone through the process of finding an employer that they want to back. They want to show up for that employer. They are constantly trying to make better coffee today than they did yesterday. They want to be supportive of their teammates. They are communicative. They're present for their customers and their employer and their teammates as much as they are for themselves. I want people to sit down and figure out which category they fit into and really make the decision of which category you fit into. And you hear yourself say, you know what? I wouldn't admit this to somebody else, but I really am one of the coffee people. Then what I want you to do is start learning how to become a coffee professional. I want you to get online and I want you to start looking at, just Google interpersonal skills. I want you to Google what is professionalism. And I want you to start going down the rabbit hole that will no doubt eventuate to kitten videos. But on the way to kitten videos, you will start seeing people talk about things like, how do I communicate with empathy? How do I listen to people? How do I ask questions at work? How do I get productive? Right now, today, these are the things that people can do to start acting more professional. You don't have to have any conversation with your employer about this, because your employer is going to notice the change in behavior immediately. And that is what the first step that's required to become a coffee professional is. We have to look at ourselves. What am I bringing to this conversation? What am I showing? How am I showing up to my own career?
That's powerful stuff. You can do it anytime, and especially now.
Right
Google
now.
Searching this stuff. Rabbit hole is right. There's a wealth of information out there that will transform who you are, and you can't spin your wheels. I mean, we could spend our entire career spinning our wheels and never becoming better at being a professional, or take that first step like you're saying. And that's really powerful advice. And I hope that we do that and we sit with the uncomfortable truth and then seek to change for the better.
Listen, I just wanted to add something there.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the fortunate position of having one of the best jobs in the world as baristas. We get to bring happiness to somebody's life in the simplest way possible, through coffee. We get to socialize with people, make coffee all day, and then go home and have no emails to answer after that. Take it from somebody who was a senior business analyst and project manager for a multinational IT company. My life was consumed by emails after work. We don't have to do that in the job that we do. We show up and do our job. We get to socialize while we're doing it, and we get to drink amazing coffee in that process. What better life is that?
True.
And you become the most well-known person in your community if you do your job well. People get happy and excited about seeing you every single morning. What part of that don't you want to be showing up as your best self for?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You just sit down long enough to think about it. It just hits you. So now we have our marching orders as baristas. and I hope we all do that this week. I certainly will, even, some 20 odd, not 20 yet, but almost 20 years later in coffee. You don't really want to stop doing that.
You never do. I never have.
Yeah. So it's like now the people who write the paychecks, the people who own the building, or the people who write the schedules and have the power in the cafe, what do we do as leaders to facilitate a healthy business, to kind of again map our own careers forward, but facilitate the same thing for others?
Starting today, I want business owners to start getting an understanding of what they need to do to get their businesses financially healthy. And what I mean by that is get your numbers in order. If that means that you need to get online and start researching what a profit and loss statement is, do it. There's so much information out there. The quick way to do that is organize a meeting with your accountant and get them to explain that. But if you can't afford that money, because we all know margins are tight right now, and they always have been and always will be, if you don't break this cycle, get online and Google what is a profit and loss statement. And then get your business in order. Figure out how to get visibilities into the numbers that you've got. That will create a freedom for you that you've never felt before, because you finally will have visibility into the true health or lack thereof of your business. And it will highlight the places where you need to make some changes. Further to that, I want you to Google, how do I communicate with my employees? Because the biggest problem that we have is that people are not talking to each other in a healthy way in our work environments. The next thing I want is every single owner across the world needs to start doing at least one barista shift every single week. There is no excuse for any owner who wants the respect of their employees not to understand what their employees endure on a daily basis.
That's
and
great.
they're three things that cafe owners can do today. I want their staff to see that they clean the toilets just like the staff clean the toilets. And that's how you're going to earn, that's the first step to earning the respect of the people that you've chosen to pay minimum wage to. And it isn't until you can feel the pain that they experience that you'll understand why they're not showing up for you.
And some of the dysfunctional things that you didn't know existed within the
Right.
system. It's funny that, there's this idea that, well, once a manager starts or a owner starts taking barista shifts, all of a sudden the things that had been broken, that had been asked about by baristas, all of a sudden they start getting fixed because the owner starts having to use those cleaning tools that don't actually clean. Or, wow, how did all of this happen? Well, firsthand knowledge.
And I get that you've got a lot to do as an owner. No one's denying that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to have a healthy business, you can't hide behind your laptop because you're not feeling any of the pain points that your employees are feeling. And if you can't feel them, you won't understand them.
Yeah, you can't empathize with something.
Exactly.
Yeah. And even though you might have one-on-ones or open door policy, all of that stuff.
Right, exactly. And I want to jump in with something there about communication and the open door policy. We have to get better as an industry of learning how to have constructive, open-minded conversations. There are a lot of issues that we're being faced with right now, and so many of them would go away if we could learn how to communicate. What I would invite everybody to do, whether you are at the barista level or an owner level, in a roastery, anywhere in the coffee industry, I would like you to start thinking about how you communicate. I spend a lot of time researching different elements of psychology just because I love that kind of thing. And you cannot deny that there is an evolutionary role in the way that people communicate based on the historical gender roles that we have. I have been the recipient firsthand of the aggression and the assertiveness of the way that men have evolutionarily been taught to behave and communicate. And I am somebody who, as a woman, really do fulfill the expectations or the conditioning that I have had until I learned how to do this differently. Women are conditioned to be more agreeable and more empathetic. There's a clear line between the way that the majority of people in those gender roles behave. Sure, there's some gray areas, but our industry really suffers from a consequence of those roles being clearly defined. As an industry, what we need to start doing is learning, at least being open to learning, communication skills from the other side. So I would like to see women, and Map It Forward is being very proactive in this. We've brought on board a psychologist to help us with this. I would like to see women or people who identify as more female, I would like to see those individuals start learning how to be assertive. I would like to see them practicing how to communicate more directly. I would like to see them having the confidence to ask for exactly what it is they want. And on the other side of things, I would like to start seeing men or people who identify with more masculine energy. I would like to see them starting to embrace what's required to be more empathetic. What does it feel like to put myself in other people's spots? What does it feel like to be more agreeable and less aggressive? And I think if we can start thinking along those lines, we can really open the doors to more constructive communication.
But it boils down to learning from those around you and not feeling like you have it figured out or your tactic figured out.
We suffer a lot of that in the coffee industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whether it's professional hubris or just the way you conduct yourself as an individual, we definitely have a wealth of information around us every single day, no matter who it is. You could be the most senior barista, and a new hire comes in and does something in a way that will teach you something you would never have learned on your own had it not been for this person who's not even been bar trained yet. Or, whoever it is that you happen to be around. So constantly learning from others' examples is huge, obviously. I really have enjoyed this conversation because it really hits on something that I think is of the moment for our industry and will define the future of sustainability for specialty coffee, especially, the shop, the last link in the chain for specialty. It's so, so important. We both work within the sphere of helping people create this, healthy profession within the coffee industry and the retail environment. So now that we're going to go out there this week and do these things and start getting better at these things, how can we find out how Map It Forward can help us? Where can we find out about your work and kind of participate in Map It Forward?
Firstly, let me say that I've really enjoyed this conversation as well. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to have such a thought-provoking conversation with you, so thank you. And the way that people can find out about what we're doing and all the cool stuff that we've got going on is to sign up to our mailing list at mapitforward.org. That's the place we communicate everything first. And we promise not to spam. We don't do that. We just tell people about what we've got going on. And then what I would encourage people to do is come and find us on our social networks. Our main, the main platform that we communicate on is Instagram, and our Instagram handle is imapitforward. The other place is the podcast called the Map It Forward Live Podcast, and that's on our YouTube channel, iTunes, and at the moment Stitcher as well. We're expanding those platforms, but our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Map It Forward, and you can just look up Map It Forward on iTunes and Stitcher, and you'll get that information.
Excellent, great. Like I said, this has been such a great time, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. Look forward to seeing all of your work, and thank you for what you're doing with Map It Forward. I really appreciate the energy and work you've put in to helping us just have a better industry, and I think just great things are to come. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your kind words, Chris, and thanks again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
So as I said in the beginning of this episode, this is the type of stuff that can definitely, if applied, radically change the results of your efforts over time. Taking these ideas, applying them right early when you might even have the temptation to think that they don't apply to you, because when you're young and you're in coffee, you tend to not want to take as much feedback. You might think you know a lot. Lee has been in the business for a long time. So have I. And I think we both connect on a lot of these points. I've been nodding my head throughout this conversation. This is something that our industry is waking up to. And Lee and her podcast are on the forefront of this movement to bring a conscious, purposeful, and just a common sense approach to professionalism in what we do in coffee bars and in our coffee careers. So go back over this episode again and really pay attention to the things that she's talking about. Go to Map It Forward and see what is there that can benefit you in your career. I highly encourage you to do so. And this was just a great talk. So many great takeaways. My thanks to Lee for being on the show, taking time to just so eloquently articulate the things that are sorely needed in our industry. So thank you, Lee. All the best to you. We really appreciate you. So if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com. And when you get there, there's going to be a sidebar for you to enter your email address. And when you do that, you will be on the list to receive the show notes and updates about Keys to the Shop in email form every week, where the key takeaways from each episode are listed out, as well as the links to resources and other things mentioned in the podcast itself, in the conversation. So if you're driving and you don't have the opportunity to take notes, you know that email is coming to you, and it will have that book or that website or the Instagram link and things like that. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me again. This stuff, my wish is that it would be just helpful for you in your career. And I appreciate your taking the time out of your day to follow along as we explore the expertise within our own industry and even outside our industry, and bring it to you through Keys to the Shop podcast, just to enhance your career where you are right now and where you're going to be in the future. So if you have feedback from me, definitely send that to chris@keystotheshop.com. I always like to hear how things are sounding to you, take suggestions, even answer some questions you might have, some tough spots you might be in. I want to be of service to you. And that's also the best way to reach out and get in contact if you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting. So that's it. And I, again, appreciate you. Thank you. And I hope, as always, that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.